Okay, so I need to tell you about this guy I know. His name is Malik and he's been living next door to me for a few years now. We've gotten along pretty well, always say hi when we see each other, but lately it's been like the drama that unfolds next door has become my own personal soap opera. So, it started with this one thing. I was walking back from work on a Friday afternoon and saw Malik arguing with his neighbor, Brody. Now, these two guys have never really gotten along, they're always at each other about something, but this time it seemed different. They were standing in the middle of the street, shouting and gesturing, and I was like, what's going on? But when I got closer, Malik just shook his head and walked away. What? I thought to myself. What could possibly make two grown men get into a fight over? We'd been talking about it all week, trying to get the lowdown, but neither of us knew anything. I asked my neighbor across the street if she'd seen anything, but she just shrugged and said, I don't know, they've always had their differences. But what did strike me as odd was that Malik seemed really agitated about it. He's a pretty laid-back guy, not the type to get worked up over things like this. And when I asked him if everything was okay, he just kind of shrugged and said, it's fine. But I could tell there was more to it than that. And then, just a few days later, Brody shows up at Malik's doorstep with a bunch of boxes and looks like he's about to cry. Malik gets defensive right away, but from what I gathered, Brody had been renting out his apartment on Airbnb without telling Malik and now he was threatening to cut ties if the rent wasn't paid immediately. But here's the thing, Malik didn't even own the place. He just lived next door. What? I know, right? It sounds crazy. And I know what you're thinking, this guy is just making it up for attention or something. But trust me, this is no small-town drama. This is big league stuff. As the days went by, Malik's situation only became more and more complicated. Brody wouldn't budge on his demand, and Malik was left with a hefty bill that he couldn't afford. He tried to negotiate, but Brody was firm. If the rent wasn't paid in full within 24 hours, he would evict him from the apartment. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could someone just do that? It didn't seem right, especially since Malik had no idea where his money came from or how it was being used. But as I dug deeper, I discovered that Brody's troubles went far beyond just a simple Airbnb dispute. According to my sources, Brody had been involved in some shady dealings with a local businessman, who had invested heavily in a new development project on the outskirts of town. It seemed that Brody was somehow connected to this project, but I couldn't quite put my finger on how. Malik's situation had brought him into contact with a woman named Sophia, who claimed to be an activist working to expose the truth about Brody and his involvement in the development project. She revealed that Brody had been using his Airbnb business as a front for money laundering, and that he was being investigated by the authorities. I was shocked. I had no idea that my neighbor's life could be so complicated. But what really took the cake was when Sophia told me that she had received threatening messages from someone claiming to be Brody's accomplice. She was terrified, but determined to see justice served. As Malik continued to deal with his own problems, he found himself in a precarious situation. He couldn't pay the rent on time, and Brody was getting more aggressive by the day. I knew that something had to give, but what would it be? Just as things were starting to come together, a new development shook everything up. Gemma, my best friend from college, called me in a panic. She told me that her cousin had just been involved in a car accident that had left him with serious injuries. But here's the thing, she didn't know if it was an accident or not. Gemma begged me to keep this quiet for now, but I knew that I couldn't help myself. I had to investigate. And as I started digging into my friend's cousin's past, I stumbled upon a surprising connection between him and Brody. I still can't believe this happened. It turned out that Brody's latest business venture was somehow tied to the car accident. The cousin in question, Alex, had been working for Brody's company at the time of the crash, and it seemed like more than just a coincidence. I decided to pay Brody a visit, determined to get to the bottom of things. When I arrived at his office, I was met with an air of confidence that I'd never seen before. But as we sat down to talk, I could sense that something was off. He seemed nervous. I asked him about Alex's involvement in the company, and he hesitated for a moment before answering. He was just an employee, Brody said, trying to brush it off. But I knew better. I could see the guilt written all over his face. Just then, Malik burst into the room, looking frazzled as usual. I've got some bad news, he said, before breaking the bombshell. Brody had been using Alex's company account to fund a series of shady business deals, and it was all about to come crashing down. The authorities arrived shortly after, and Brody was taken away in handcuffs. As I watched him being led out of the office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. It had been a long and winding road, but justice had finally been served. But just as things were starting to settle down, Alex's cousin, Alex himself, walked into the room, his face pale and shaken. I'm sorry, he said, before explaining that he was involved in an even more sinister plot than I could have ever imagined. It turned out that Brody had been using him to launder money for a notorious crime lord. The authorities took over from there, and Alex was taken into custody as well. As the dust settled, I couldn't help but think about how far our little neighborhood had come in the past year. From Malik's financial woes to Brody's shady dealings, it had been a wild ride. As for me, I was left to pick up the pieces and wonder what other secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of our seemingly ordinary community. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again.